Hey folks, JR back for another episode of Echoes of Shannon Street Case File. This is going to be a short story. Tennessee versus Garner, Supreme Court case, decision that came down in 1985. Also decided, actually more than decided, it changed the deadly force policies in the United States for all police departments. The reason I thought we would bring it up is in the episode down the road, we're going to try to decide if the Tact Unit was justified in using deadly force inside the house. The reason I'm bringing Garner up now is Garner has no effect on what happened at Shannon Street. Obviously, Shannon Street was 1983. This court case wasn't decided till 85, but it does help us to know what the policy was at the time the Tact Unit was operating as opposed to what it is that we know today. It makes a difference. You have to kind of know the rules before you start enforcing them. So that's what we're going to do with this. We're going to go through it just real quick, just give you an idea. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you get a chance. Click on that link down in the description. I appreciate you. Let's get started. All right, that's a picture of Elton Hyman. Lieutenant Hyman was my lieutenant for a little bit of time down South Precinct. I really liked him. He's a very nice man. Okay, these are the facts. This is what the Supreme Court's looking at when the case comes to them. On the evening of October 3, 1974, Officer Elton Hyman and Leslie Wright of the Memphis Police Department were dispatched to a burglary call. They met with a neighbor who had heard the sound of glass breaking next door. Officer Hyman went to the rear of the house and observed Edward Garner running across the backyard. Hyman ordered Garner to halt, but instead he began to climb the fence at the edge of the yard. Hyman, who later reported that he saw no weapon and did not believe Garner to be armed, fired his handgun, striking Garner in the back of the head, killing him. A Tennessee statute provided at that time, if, after a police officer has given notice of intent to arrest a criminal suspect, the suspect flees or forcibly resists, the officer may use all the necessary means to effect the arrest. In other words, Officer Hyman, and you may hear me call him Lieutenant Hyman, but because I really thought the world of Lieutenant Hyman, he was correct at the time, so his actions were correct according to the law. Now, Walter Bailey, you probably remember him from some of the clips from the documentary Shannon Street Echoes Under a Blood Red Moon. Now, he was the attorney that took the case. The suspect's father sued the Memphis Police Department for violating his son's civil rights. So Walter Bailey takes the case and they go to district court, which district court's located in Memphis, Tennessee. Now the courthouse in Memphis represents the Western District of Tennessee. So that's where the case was held first in federal court. The officer used deadly force despite being reasonably sure the suspect was unarmed and thinking that he was 17 or 18 years old and of slight build. The father subsequently brought an action in federal district court seeking damages under 42 United States Code 1983 for asserted violations of his son's constitutional rights. The district court held that the statute and the officer's actions were constitutional. In other words, the court in Memphis, the judge said, well, he was following the statute, so his actions were justified, they were constitutional, so he threw it out. Mr. Bailey, they appeal it, and it goes to the Court of Appeals, which is the Sixth Circuit, and I believe that's located in Cincinnati. Anyways, Court of Appeals, they reversed the decision and says, no, the officer's actions were excessive. Not saying the officer's at fault, because the officer's following the statute, but they're saying that the statute itself is faulty, that it's excessive. Of course, then the police department, Memphis Police Department, appeals it, and it goes to the Supreme Court. All right, so the Supreme Court looks over the case, and this is what they ruled. The Tennessee statute is unconstitutional insofar as it authorizes the use of deadly force against, as in this case, an apparently unarmed, non-dangerous fleeing suspect. Such force may not be used unless necessary to prevent the escape, and the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. In other words, if it's not a violent felon, if you've committed a murder or a robbery, an aggravated assault, attempted murder, a violent felony, and the officer thinks that if you escape, you're going to be a further danger to the community, they can use deadly force. But you can't just shoot somebody because they've stolen a car, committed a burglary, which would be considered a nonviolent felony. So that's what the Supreme Court said. Case commentary. This decision responded to the evolution of the common law, which formerly imposed a death sentence for most felonies. Shooting a nonviolent fleeing felon historically would have been permitted because it would have been the same result as if the suspect would have been caught and convicted. And the Supreme Court simply said this is no longer the situation. And what they did was they adjusted the rule regarding the use of deadly force to account for the difference, because it's not necessary to use deadly force to apprehend somebody in every case, every situation where there's a felony. It needs to be a violent felony. So that's how the rule was changed. That's how the law was changed, and all police departments had to adjust to that. And in fact, what you saw is a decrease in police shootings. You know, nowadays people complain about the police shoot too many people. Well, back in the 60s and 70s, you might have one or two police departments that were shooting as many people as all police officers across the country shoot now. In our modern times, police shoot about 900 to 1,000 people a year. Now you have to take into account that police departments nowadays, they come in contact with citizens probably 150, 200 million times a year. So of that percentage, 900 to 1,000, that is microscopic. When back in the 70s, 80s, they were shooting them in droves. Anyways, just something to think about. But now remember, when we look at the Shannon Street, we look at the Tact Unit, the rules they're operating under, the statute they're operating under is this. If after a police officer has given notice of intent to arrest a criminal suspect, the suspect flees or forcibly resists, the officer may use all the necessary means to effect the arrest. So that's the rule we're following when we're going to review the Tact Unit's actions at Shannon Street. And remember, we have to judge what the Tact Unit did based on the facts they knew at the time. You do not pass judgment based on what you know after the fact. So just keep that in mind when we get around to reviewing and making our own decision whether the shootings were justified. Folks, I appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you down the road.